This is the Asia Hollywood Greenlight podcast, episode number 47.
And rolling sound. Quiet. Here we go. Ready.
Speeding.
120, take 7. And action.
This is Caryn McCann, the host of the Asia Hollywood Greenlight podcast, a podcast about creating and distributing content for both Hollywood and Asia. As you just heard, we changed our name from the China Hollywood Greenlight podcast to the Asia Hollywood Greenlight. We are expanding. More on this in a minute. To show your support, please subscribe, leave a rating, or share this podcast on social media so more people can discover this podcast. The more we grow the community, the more we can collaborate. Any links mentioned in the podcast can be found in the show notes at the Asia list, where Hollywood and Asia meet. Just go to https://chnlist.com/podcast-blog and look for this episode, which is number 47. Before I introduce today's guest, I'd like to start out with a motivational quote to encourage our listeners to continue on their path to achieving their own green light. And today's quote is from Walt Disney, and he said, "All our dreams can come true if we have the courage to pursue them." A quick update on what I'm working on. As you heard the big news, we've expanded. If you're a regular listener, you've noticed from the intro that we changed the name from the China Hollywood Greenlight to the Asia Hollywood Greenlight. We've also changed our membership website, which was called the China List, and it's now called the Asia List. As you know, our membership website is a platform to connect writers and producers. This change reflects our expansion beyond Hollywood and China to now include Asia. Markets like India, South Korea, Japan, and Pan-Asia, for example, Indonesia, Singapore, Malaysia, and the Philippines, are booming. The welcome mat is open to foreigners, and many of these countries offer tax incentives to shoot there. So starting now, we are expanding our vision and look forward to bringing in more guests and promoting more collaborations between Hollywood and Asia. Industry pros like producers, talent reps, creative execs, and directors can get free membership to the Asia List. Find your next great script or writer before your competition does. You can also post tailored calls for submissions on our private writing jobs page. It's free. Sign up at https://chnlist.com. And writers, sign up for the Asia List. The first 50 writers that sign up can upload their first script for free. No credit card is required. Use this link, https://chnlist.com/first-script-free. And that will be in the show notes as well. And now, here is the main segment. Today's guest is Christopher Chen, born in Taipei, raised in Brazil, Switzerland, and Canada. Christopher is a film and TVC and VR producer, director, focused on the entertainment and media industry, based in the Asia-Pacific region. Currently, Christopher is the executive producer and head of development of the Monk Studios, the largest animation and VFX studio in Southeast Asia, based in Bangkok, Thailand, overseeing several projects in both animation and live-action feature films and series. Well, Chris, thank you for coming on the show today. I told the audience a little bit about you, but why don't you take a minute and tell us about yourself personally and your business?
In a summary, more to keep things simplified, because life is as complicated as we are trying to untangle things. Technically, I am in Taiwan, although my office is in Beijing and Shanghai.
Okay.
Obviously, I'm working remotely, but the headquarters of my company are based in Bangkok, in Thailand. And we've been mostly busy with most of the shows from the West at this moment. Yeah, we've been super busy doing one feature film from Paramount at this moment. Animated film, yes. 2 animated series for Nickelodeon, one for Netflix, I think we're doing Lock and Key season 3, the VFX. We're doing season 2 of Carnival Row, Orlando Bloom and Cara Delevingne. Okay. And we have like 2 shows in China under development. We're doing character designs for 2 companies, but mostly strictly as a service work instead, because of a lot of things that's going on in China. People are inviting us to do the co-productions and so on, but the market's not longer there for the Western people trying to do business in China. I can explain along to what's going on, and then so can come afterwards.
Okay, well let's go more into this into the China market. So my first question is, why do you want to enter the China market? And you can also maybe talk a little bit about the decline of co-productions, what you just alluded to. But let's start out with, why did you want to enter the China market?
I think everybody went to the China, not only just myself. I think everybody went to the China market pretty much like 12, 15 years ago, when a little bit before the Beijing Olympics. That was the time when China finally revealed to has risen to the world, as of we spoke many years ago. And it was about the time when globalization was at the peak, when we pretty much saw the emergence of the new markets and how to capitalize on that. And obviously, during the time when I was there, I was the first one, together with a team of Canadian. I'm from Canada, by the way. Even though I was born in Taipei, but I was raised pretty much in Canada. I was one of the producers for a CBC miniseries called Iron Road. It was pretty much a series that was showing the reconnection of the Chinese workers to build the Trans-Canada Highway, railway in the 19th century. Technically, the story has not much to happen in China per se, because the whole story was pretty much 90% set in Canada per se. The actual shoot of the movie was pretty much shot in China, because you cannot find the locations anymore, because as the Canadian Railway developed, most of the landscape is pretty much gone, except for parts in Alberta for obvious reasons. So in order to research we could do a lot of stuff with visual effects, which we did, but a lot of the natural landscape, we had to go back to China and try to do some location scouting to match to what it was in Canada in the 19th century. Because of that, we went to the idea to do a Canada-China co-pro, the first one in Canada since 1979.
Wow.
The last one was Bethune, starring Donald Sutherland at the time. Right. This one, we had the participation from Peter O'Toole in one of his last roles before he died. And we got also Sun Neill from Jurassic Park, and Tony Leung from The Lover, and Sun Li, which is a very popular actress in China, in doing a lot of TV series. And the process took over a year, where we kind of realized that we went a little bit too early, because the shoot was almost a total, not fully a nightmare like everybody would expect, but it was pretty much essentially that we realized that the two systems couldn't talk to each other, mainly because communication issues, technical issues, that the know-how, and it is pretty much as one person was talking bow, 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 and then people were talking in squares, kind of thing. And then, but ultimately, the movie got done. The show got released as a theatrical feature film in China, and for us, it got released as a mini series for the CBC. And then we kind of realized that even though there were lots of problems, there was a huge promise of the China market because
Of
we just
course.
saw the big grandeur, the amount of population, how the scale there. So after the show was pretty much wrapped up, instead of my colleagues heading back to Canada, I decided to stay a little bit a while and wonder a little bit how things were going until all of a sudden, in a kind of a weird phone call, like headhunters just called me, like in the middle of nowhere, while I was just doing the so-called the backpacking thing, like exploring China, because I enjoy doing the things like bungee jumping, zip lining, all those kind of
Yeah.
extreme sports kind of thing. And then a German visual effects company called Pixamundo called me, I think in 2009, asked me if I was if I was still in China, and second, if I would be willing to open their Beijing branch because they would have a lot of outsourcing work coming through, and they would want to have somebody who could help to set up an office, to recruit the labor necessary to get the jobs done, and so on. Little did I knew after signing a lot of DNAs and legal documents that apparently that Beijing office would start doing a lot of outsourcing work for ILM, actually.
Okay. Yeah. Okay. That explains why you entered the China market. I'm going to, before you start talking about co-productions, I want the audience to kind of understand more of what you do day to day, which leads to the question, what are 2 or 3 main tasks you do on a, quote, typical day?
I'm a media executive now because as the time went, I'm no longer a VFX artist, right? Because as age starts kicking in your butt, that's true for everyone, unless if you are drinking some potion that keeps you young and alive.
Okay.
Well, technically, I'm the so-called glorified entertainment and media executive that has 3 key things: understanding the investor's mind. Okay, it's pretty much out on the rise, pitching projects to investors. Second, you have to talk to distributors and understanding what is the concerns of the people when they're buying the film, the changes in the cast, things related to story that has to be a concern that you have to be addressed to the people on your technical team. And then obviously the third part is pretty much to understand a new project that's coming along and to read scripts and so on. That's being done on a day-by-day basis kind of thing.
Okay. Well, you mentioned that, you read scripts and you're pitching and you're talking to distributors. How do you find these business partners? And then the follow-up question is, how do you suggest the listeners find perhaps a Chinese producer?
I think 2 things. This question is a little bit like 10, 12 years too old already, too late for that in regards to finding a Chinese producer.
Okay.
If you may, I think the broader question is like, what would be the best way to pitch an Asian producer? Because technically what happened during the COVID, and I don't know whether you interviewed a lot of my other colleagues, I'm not saying there's a fully decoupling or decamping from the Chinese market, but over the course of these last 2 years, COVID pretty much accelerated to something that was already going, what's happening, like slowly in the Chinese market, that thanks to the ascension of Xi Jinping to running the Communist Party of China and so on, and also because of a lot of things happening in the Chinese market. Because let's just put it this way, as the time goes by, and yes, China has the largest amount of movie theaters in the world, right? And China is building, the cinemas is still on on an unprecedented scale. But as time goes by, the amount of cinemas that expand is not expanding on the urban areas anymore, because the urban areas where more educated people that were pretty much 67% were educated in the West, right? They came back to China to educate. Those are the guys who pretty much watch Western films, right? But then if you look at the Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, because these are the city tiers, the first tier cities, the population of those first tier cities, they don't amount to more than pretty much more between 75 to 100 million people.
Oh, okay.
If you look at these rough numbers, okay? But then if you look at the biggest expansion of the Chinese cinemas is pretty much on the third and the fourth tier cities. We're talking about people, the so-called nonchuns, the farmers, the people in the rural areas, and so where the cinemas are built in a much cheaper way. But then people, whatever you find entertainment in China, people will go because they don't have much things to do other than doing like ecotourism and so on. But if you look at the big expansion, it's pretty much on the far-flung areas where not much things are going on, and these are where the big numbers are coming in, which amounts to 800 million people. That's the market that everybody wants to reach to China. The problem when you are reaching to those second and third and fourth tier cities is because these people are not as educated towards the Western culture. Apparently, their culture is very purely Chinese, and they can barely. They think the Western culture is very alienated to him. They don't understand the language. It's not even about being anti-Americans, because due to the nature and for historical reasons, and bear with me, I think that there's also another issue that not understanding what China is, because technically, even though everybody speaks Chinese Mandarin, you're talking about a place that's more of a continent, very similar to India, where you have more than 54 dialects, very different from each other. And when you look into each different city, each city is pretty much similar to the size of each European country, right? So if you look into the numbers, it's really hard for them. It's already hard for them to understand Chinese Mandarin. This is why even Chinese movies, they have Chinese subtitles for the local people to understand what's going on, because when you go to each different city, each different village, they talk very different dialects. Some are variations of the others. But then if you go to the extreme north, to the extreme south, the north talks Mandarin and the south speaks Cantonese. And then you have the west, which is much Xinjiang province, it's a Muslim place. And then you have the eastern part, which is pretty much fully of Buddhists. So there is the issue about normalizing to a single language like Mandarin. So for them, it technically in their mindset, prioritizing their culture is a must for them, rather than watching Hollywood films per se. And as the time goes by, the tastes vary, because in the beginning, when the big numbers of the box office starts coming in, were pretty much the Marvel films and not so much the Star Wars, but pretty much the Bond films, all the movies with the brands from the studios. But nowadays, because of the Cold War that's going on, and even more accelerated with the Russian invasion of Ukraine, you can just see what happened. Like, for example, the Batman came out on theaters in China and 2 weeks ago, and the numbers were really bad. And it was even more accentuated because of COVID lockdown restrictions over there. So, and then there is this kind of anomaly, because all of a sudden there are really crappy Chinese movies made with like $5 million budget, $10 million budget, but people seem to be more in tune with that, right? Rather than watching a big Hollywood Chinese film. But it's a combination of bad timing for the Western culture in China. not so
when
much.
you say 5 million US.
Yes, $5 million like
And
budgets. Like
okay, and when you say a quote, dare I say, crappy Chinese film, and
no,
the
they're
second,
crappy. No, they're
okay,
crappy. No. We're talking like even the Chinese audience and the Chinese critics would say it's a crappy commercial Chinese movie because China at the time there was a huge change in the market because China, I think 20, 30 years ago was really well known in the worldwide market as a great country for releasing art house films from Zhang Yimou, Chen Kaige, and Feng Xiaogan, and still is at some extent. But right now, 30 years goes because right now the economics and the commerce prevails over art per se, because it's all about boosting the box office in order to provide better economy for the market and so on, provides jobs for the people down there. So overnight, over the last 15 years, Chinese films became very commercial, but they only became very commercial for their local market. But because technically the cultural gap of understanding Chinese films and Western films, there's a huge gap. It's not like I want to go back to when you said about the question about how what's the best way to find your
producer.
Your co-producer. I think the best bet is pretty much find I think a lot of people went to China with the understanding is the huge adage of Hollywood, trying to find some sucker's money.
Huh.
I think 20 years ago, we went with the Japanese, and then Sony bought Sony Columbia. Nowadays, Matsushita, that was Panasonic, was a partial owner of Universal Studios at that time before moving to Comcast and Seagrams, and
Right.
JVC was the funder of the original Die Hard films, and so there was a Japanese spirit. And then the 90s, they went to the German film funds, where you don't need to pay. The dentist was the one funding your film because they didn't need to pay taxes in the end, kind of thing, for the German. And then now we went to the 2000s when they need to find a very wealthy Chinese real estate investor. And this is why you went to real estate companies like Wanda and Sunak to own a piece like Legendary Entertainment and so on, right?
Right.
Unfortunately, those days are gone because as the time went by, and I don't think it's pretty much because only of the Chinese audience. I think the primary market for the Western films is pretty much the audience for Beijing, Shanghai, Guangzhou, and Shenzhen, because those are the very urban, cosmopolitan areas where you think about the Chinese cities, but they're not really Chinese cities. They're more international cities.
Okay.
Very modern, per se. The living standards are as close as Chicago or Oregon, per se, like very much like affluent, well-educated people. But then if you come to the other side, the reality is there's the China side, the real face of China, which is still not a very urban, is still a still underdeveloped country, kind of say, per se, right? So that area, it will remain Chinese for a very long time. And
well, let me just ask you what you said a minute ago about these Chinese films, maybe a $5 million budget, which is huge. That are less than, dare I say, stellar, but do the Chinese people in these third and fourth tier cities think these are good movies, or do they believe what the critics say, that they're not good movies?
Chinese people, they have a very unique characteristic. Like it's pretty much what they live on. They live on a copycat culture. Like once they know that something can make money, there is a flood of movies very similar to the original movie. The copycat is like pretty much like if you see a movie like The Matrix, and all of a sudden there's 10 movies of the week imitating the visual style of The Matrix 6 months later, right? China has had that same problem when you have a thriller that comes from Hong Kong, because you have the Hong Kong genre thriller done by John Woo or Wong Kar-wai, not Wong Kar-wai, but John Woo or the
Chui Hark. Chui Hark
is more like fantasy, medieval fantasy thing.
Yeah, maybe. Okay.
But in terms of, and then there's all the concept of taste, because usually it used to be that a Hong Kong film from Jackie Chan would make money. It doesn't come 12 months later, it doesn't work anymore, because the Chinese people are very fickle. Because it's like also you consume one thing, you can just look at the rate of divorces that's coming on in China. Because once you get married 2 months or 3 months later or 2 years later, there is a divorce coming up. And
okay.
People switch couples like in an unprecedented speed. It's like the time of the novelty. Once you engage something, you fell in love, and then you have a fight. The speed of the development of things is like 3 times faster than the West. Okay, the same thing happens to life as well. Because by the time I was living in the West, the speed of the amount of jobs that I had in China or in Asia Pacific is about 3 or 4 times faster as well.
So maybe what if there's Westerners out there that want to do business with Chinese producers, maybe what they should do, the Westerners, is focus on the first tier cities, the Shanghais, the Beijings, Shenzhens.
Sure, if you have a way to take the money away out of China.
That's true. Okay. Yeah, the capital, getting the capital out of China. Yes, that's a problem.
That's pretty much an impossible thing to do, especially now that because of the economic recession that's happening in China. So it's very unlikely, because the Chinese government will find 300 crazy ways for the money to stay in a country, because their priority is not to give money away to foreigners.
Of course.
You have to keep that in mind. Okay.
Well, go ahead.
But then what's happening now is because the Chinese people that had the money already, that wants to do movie with foreigners, their money is already out of China. So they can do business with foreign countries because they already set offices in LA most of the time. But you're talking about companies like Tencent, Legendary. Like Dune was made entirely with Chinese money, just to let you know, right? But then those companies will only work with established studios because of track record. For the indie producer, there's not even a chance. And everybody asks, well, if that's the case, then why bother with that as well? I think the next step, what everybody's doing is like, is not so focused so much in China, because everybody's going to China just to market the film. It's not so much about making the films together with them, because doing that, it's pretty much like a nightmare, right? Right now, there is the biggest concentration, the next flavor of the month, so to speak, is pretty much Southeast Asia. And this is why I ended up moving to work with a Thai company, okay? And also my friend Kevin Geiger is also working with Southeast Asian companies, but it's mainly because of the results, what's happening with the newest Cold War 2.0, where whoever was camped out in Beijing because of COVID and so on, it became pretty much impossible to do things in China anymore. So whoever was already camped in Beijing, they already moved to Singapore, moved to South Korea. If you look at what Apple Plus has been doing, the people from UTA, if you can talk to the people from UTA in your next conversation, their market has shifted from China and moving stuff to South Korea, which is indeed the real cultural capital of Asia now. Because if you look at the amount of international acceptance of the Korean films and Korean entertainment and Korean singers like BTS, Parasite won the Oscar recently.
Right.
And then you have Squid Game, right? And you have to remember, Mickey Lee, the founder of CJ Entertainment, she knew all how to structure the Korean entertainment, mainly because she was a graduate at UCLA, and she actually was working. She was working as an intern, working as assistant for Jeff Katzenberg in the 90s. And after learning everything from Katzenberg and the DreamWorks, her family was the one who did the initial seed money for DreamWorks. Okay, and because of that, Mickey went back to South Korea, started up a CG Entertainment, and part of the reason why the Korean films are more accepted internationally is because half of the people working on the Korean film industry are actually from Koreatown, from LA. Okay, they learn everything. They learn everything from USC. They're graduates from USC, American Film Institute, and USC, and they moved back to Seoul because that's the center of entertainment, and this is where places like Taiwan, even Japan, that they have very healthy anime market in Japanese. Everybody's trying to emulate the Korean success, and not for China. When people went to China, everybody had that kind of a hope that they could integrate China to the rest of the world using Chinese financing and so on because of the sheer size of the population. But in the end result, it became something a little bit awkward because as time went by, the media executives from Hollywood, including myself and other people who were raising money for Paramount Pictures, for Warner, a lot of people were camping with hopes that they could glue something together. But more and more, we found out that you were dealing with a culture more similar to India, where you have a civilization state like China that have 1,000 years of culture. And you realize that you're dealing with a country very unlike other people, or like the West, Europe. They actually don't have much interest in being part of the Hollywood United States system, kind of into the international system, as much as because they realize that why would I give $10-50 million from my pocket in order to go for Hollywood, in order to go back to my country for doing so they'd rather cut out the middleman and only do movies for themselves in a very similar fashion to what the Indians are doing for Bollywood.
Right. So, and the market is so big enough that the Chinese, they can make plenty of money in China.
Yes.
Well, that's obviously that's a big obstacle for Westerners. But speaking of obstacles, that kind of leads me to my next question. Mm-hmm. What obstacle did you encounter on a past project? How did you overcome it, and what did you learn?
You learn to bypass them.
Good.
In some ways that you get stuck to 20. I'm not the only one. You can pretty much ask. Next time when you can pretty much ask a gentleman that we all know of, and his name is Chris Fenton. He was the one who co-produced Iron Man 3.
Right.
From DMG, and I'm more than happy to introduce you via email and so on. Chris wrote a book about that, and Chris pretty much was the first one that he decamped China right away. He's leaving LA, and we all had our China phase. Not that we are regret. We don't regret at all. I think we learned a lot of things with them. But then we learn also try to be practical, and we're actually moving towards to the second phase. It's not that globalization didn't work; it worked to a certain extent until it didn't. Okay,
right.
And China was the huge beneficiary of globalization. Don't get me wrong, because otherwise they wouldn't have such wealth that we're seeing at this moment. But it grew in a such proportion that they want to be the masters of their own destiny, not be guided by Hollywood. And I do respect on that. But then whatever is somebody's loss, it becomes someone else's gain. So because of what's going on, and I can tell whoever wants to, if they want to have my 2 cents of my opinion as to what's going on to everybody because everybody is finding their own formula to adapt and survive the post-COVID era and during the time of the Cold War 2.0 that's happening officially now, right? I think it's coming to a moment that not that people are crying and relenting and quitting and moving back to LA. No, actually, it's apparently exactly the opposite. I think a lot of people are staying in Asia, per se. And unlike what a lot of people are thinking that everybody's retreating, actually it's happening exactly what I'm about to say, because of the factor of we're seeing the Cold War in the same way that new borders of the Iron Curtain are being designed now. I think there's going to be part geopolitically speaking, and the culture is going to affect. There's going to be a very strong international and American presence in the Asia Pacific, not inside China, but on the borders of China. Because
well, that's an opportunity.
Yes, and this is why I can tell you when we're talking as of did you know that Marvel, even during COVID times, they sent Ms. Marvel to shoot in Thailand? Okay.
No.
I'm just telling you now. Okay.
That's great. That's great.
Russell Crowe is actually shooting in Bangkok at this moment. The people from Skydance signed a deal with Mickey Lee to do a lot of Skydance shows, like the Skydance from Mission Impossible and all the stuff.
Right.
Setting up Mickey Lee from CJ is funding in
of course.
Some stuff in South Korea at this moment. So whilst China is not saying welcome, thanks but no thanks kind of thing, because technically China still has a lot of the leftover slate that was kept, like it was financed 2 years ago, and then we're pretty much on the last portions of the release of the films they signed deals 2 years ago, and they're slowly getting finished up with Top Gun, Mission Impossible, because these are the last portion of the slate that they're funding, and who knows what's going to happen afterwards. But China has these last vestiges, but while the China phase is in the process of slowing down, I'm not allowed to say much to what's going on, but I can say because of confidentiality agreements. But let's just say that there's going to be a lot of international and American presence on countries and regions on the borders of China. That's all I can say, including Taiwan as well. There's going to be some American films. There's going to be some American films shooting in Taiwan as well.
Well, that's great. That's great. I mean, it's I think any cooperation between East and West. I mean, it's Asia. It's I think Hollywood still has an opportunity in Asia.
Yes.
Now, if China is, if the welcome mat or the Cold War 2.0 is going strong, then you pivot.
Yes.
And the pivot would be Southeast Asia or Taiwan or North Asia. It's there's still a lot of opportunity, and so I'm glad. Go ahead.
Just let you know, just give you a few tips. So remember that 2 years ago during the Trump era, we had the Hong Kong having all the riots. What's going on?
Right.
And then all of a sudden, the Communist Party went straight over, broke down the one country, two systems, and become like a one country, one system thing. During the time, most of the entertainment and media offices that were pretty much in Hong Kong, like Disney, HBO Max, Warner, Amazon, everybody moved their offices, and they all moved. All the foreign offices, they moved all their headquarters, Asian headquarters, to Singapore.
Oh, okay. Singapore.
So if you think why, because Singapore has a very strong banking.
Right. That's right.
The Asian capital. So basically, Singapore is becoming the equivalent to what Switzerland was during the Cold War, the first Cold War between the Russians and the and the Americans during the
Right.
1950s. Southeast Asia is becoming the neutral zone where the Chinese and the West can still talk, because technically Southeast Asia is part of the Belt and Road Initiative for the China. Because China, as much as they want, their only way to expand their culture is going to go for Southeast Asia. Okay, so they don't want to have any conflict with the people over there. Okay, because they want to do business. At the same time, let's just face it, neither the Americans and neither the Europeans are stupid. They're going to be waiting. They're also going to be camping in Southeast Asia as well.
Okay.
Because the French, they had relations with Vietnam and so on. So right now, the biggest opportunity is not in China anymore. It's actually going to be in Southeast Asia, because the Chinese are open. Southeast Asia is one of the places where the Chinese are willing to open their pockets to develop the area for their all influence, and and also because Southeast Asia, especially for Thailand, because Thailand has this strong history, connections to Hollywood since James Bond went to shoot The Man with the Golden Gun in the 1970s, and Tomorrow Never Dies with Pierce Brosnan in the 90s, right? We had The Beach with Leonardo
Right.
And Werner Herzog with Christian Bale. So there's a long history with Thailand, with Hollywood. So very much we're going to see a lot of action moving back there as well.
Good.
But then you have to remind them, well, but should we be body heads with the Chinese? No, because the whole China thing, I think a lot of people, if you don't study the history of China, is like China was always like that during the last 15 centuries, actually. Because in a way, if you look at the history of China, China was never really open. And China, every 100 years, they always open and close their gates depending of their convenience. Okay.
Right.
And then it was during the time when there was a famine, there was a lot of insurrections, internal infighting, insurrections inside, and then they required the collaboration with the West in order to develop that place. But now that there's a huge economic boom there, obviously they don't want to share their wealth to everybody, and they feel entitled because it's their land. And so obviously the closing gates time is happening now. Okay. But do we want to butt heads with them? No, because I think there's what I'm talking is pretty much the government. It's a government policy.
Right.
But the Chinese people is a total different subject, because there's a lot of great filmmakers, good Chinese people, hardworking people, and they would love to work with the Western people. Okay.
Glad to hear it.
But obviously, they're not going to operate inside their territory, because it's pretty much how the lay of the land is controlled by the Communist Party. Okay.
Of course.
But nothing will stop the Chinese entrepreneurs that have the wealth to operate outside the jurisdiction.
That's what the Westerners can target, is these Chinese entrepreneurs working outside of China.
Yes.
In Southeast Asia.
Yes.
Perfect.
This is what's happening now. I can give you a first hand. Kevin can be a witness to that. So there is a flux of the people willing to do. So we're saying the China entertainment phase 2.0, or not even China, is the Asia entertainment 2.0, is the collaboration between the South Koreans, because they have a very strong. Currently, if you look at the example about great Asian entertainment, we never talk about China, because the Chinese films are still far away off from what we like to see at this moment. There's money, but the money is not indicative about how much good the film is for international audience. So right now, everybody's looking to Korean films. If you're talking about local Asian cinema, right? And then
interesting.
And then if you want to look into art house films, obviously it's Taiwan, because the influence of Ang Lee over the last 20, 30 years of Ang Lee, Tsang Yang, and so on. Japan is pretty much predominantly because of the streaming market. thanks to Netflix and Apple Plus, people coming in and nurturing. Japan is actually, even though it's a very closed society, Japan wants to sell, like animes are a very strong export for them, right?
Right.
So right now, if you look at that, there's no, even though there's this China big question mark, nothing has been more exciting than coming to Asia, because China, not per se China, but the Asian entertainment market has been booming ever since. Like in the next 2 or 3 years, thanks to the streams, especially with the opening of Disney Plus in Asia.
Right.
Okay, there's going to be a big boom of the Asian content, but the ones that are helping doing a mixed combo of Asian entertainment with Hollywood are going to be the biggest winners. Okay,
I'm glad to hear you say that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I wouldn't think so much if you're there about China. I think we need to broaden up our mindset a little bit.
Right.
Okay, and look for opportunities, because you're not going to be sitting crying out loud because some door has been shut. Actually,
No.
I think you got to move beyond that and look into the horizon, because technically, even the local Chinese people that once worked in the West, they're about to be they're not going to stay in China that very long as well.
Yeah. I think this is a turning point, and I'm glad to hear it, because that means there's opportunities out there in Asia.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned some big obstacles, the Cold War 2.0, getting money out of China. That leads to my next question. If you could magically solve two current problems, what would they be? And they could be big problems, macro, micro, whatever.
The biggest problem is they take money out of China, and this is not a secret. Okay, I think everybody who tried to do that, everybody who says, "Oh, I got Chinese money," well, okay. First, with the exception of the companies like Alibaba, Tencent, Bona, that already have capital overseas, they have bank accounts that are located overseas. I really would challenge everybody who would say that right now. Okay, aside from these established ones. Okay, so getting money of China from wealthy people that don't belong to the entertainment second, but they are interested in financing films, I would put a big question mark. I wouldn't even explore that for a moment, because time is very short, and then you would want to work with people that's pretty much established in the market, because setting up things in Asia takes much longer, and especially because you're communicating with different customs, different languages, different production procedures, because technically bond companies don't work at all here in China. Not only in China, bond companies don't function in Asia, period, right? Okay. Even with South Korea. And so another kind of formula that you have to understand how to get the financing restructured and engineered to make it work, then yes, you need to help from your local Asian partners for that. That's for sure. Okay, but the most important, I think, that people need to think, and even before that, because it comes hand in hand, as the movie business are evolving, and it evolved way before this all started with the COVID, and so especially because now the tectonic platforms are shifting into such a way that most of the business is not even theatrical anymore, right?
Right.
We're heading to streaming, and things are getting more into the interactive, and especially because if you look around, majority of the people funding the film business are no longer people from the traditional media. Majority of the people that are funding the movie business are the tech companies, like
right?
Apple, Amazon, right? Like Amazon bought MGM, and it's like Alibaba, which is an e-commerce site in China. They have Alibaba Pictures, the same thing with Tencent, which is a large gaming company. I think if I were you, I would probably at the rifting point that I would avoid talking to the traditional media companies, because the traditional film companies are completely broke because of COVID, because the whole COVID made the theatrical business unsustainable for the long period. And if you want to get financing, it's going to come mainly from the streamers at this point, or the tech companies promoting high bandwidth like 5G, because they want to prove they have enough cable to move data around, right? So a lot of the entertainment's coming from the people who made a lot of money during the COVID period, is pretty much the gaming companies, the telecoms, and the high-tech companies. Okay.
So would you say, like, the two problems that you would like to solve, one, of course, is getting money out of China, and the second one is you can't rely on the old traditional medias for financing. You need to look to the streamers.
Streamers, gaming companies, anything that's related to tech. Anybody's saying, yeah, but Taiwan, blah, 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 but Taiwan doesn't have. Well, I can tell you one thing. During COVID, Taiwan was one of the few places that COVID wasn't affected. Actually, it was one of the best places. I felt it was extremely safe to be in Taiwan, okay? And also because the economy never stopped in Taiwan. Taiwan made a huge chunk of money by being the place that's powering 60% of the semiconductors around the globe. Okay?
Right.
That's one of the reasons why there's a huge people scared of China invading Taiwan. But obviously, the West is paying attention, because I don't think they would allow the same thing that's happening in Ukraine to happen to Taiwan, mainly because it's a center of the semiconductors for the whole world, right? And
exactly.
Because of the fact that China is strictly a high-tech place, where 5G, where semiconductors and AI is being developed, expect that there's going to be some news from Taiwan. Taiwan's not a big film industry, but Taiwan's going to play a very significant part in doing things that ahead of the curve, because Taiwan is a place mainly known for doing tech startups. So for indie films that are going to require some kind of a know-how using new technology, that's where Taiwan's going to come into the place.
So is that kind of leads to my next question about, obviously you're in Taiwan. I know you work in Thailand as well.
Mm-hmm.
What sort of future projects are you looking for? And
very good question, because technically, if you see around, it doesn't take like a crystal ball for everybody to think. The future of content is pretty much linked to the high-tech business. It's pretty much where the content is being flowed. It's where you're gonna throw the content from the 5G infrastructure, from the pipes. You're gonna see things from the mobile. Big screens or small screens, everybody's gonna have instant access to content. And because of that, the amount of content being spread around the world is going to expand exponentially. We're not talking, wow. It's going to be double or triple. Just to get you an idea, if a company like Peter Jackson, who's providing visual effects for the Peter Jackson films and for James Cameron, like the Avatar sequels, right?
Mm-hmm.
Even Weta Digital, that was only used to do visual effects, now they're getting into the content business by producing animated films and TV series, live action, and so on, right? They had to actually open offices in San Francisco and Vancouver now.
Okay.
Weta opening in Vancouver now. Why? Because it's technology impacting on the delivery of doubling up the amount of content coming up. It's only by the technology that you have to figure out how to make films faster without adding too many cheap slaves into the process. Okay, so a whole new pipeline for film production will have to happen because a lot of people are getting overworked. Like you can see the unions screaming, yelling because they're underpaid and so on. And because a lot of people, they feel they're being kind of exploited because people are not getting paid, but you have to do so much work out of nowhere kind of thing. I think part of the reason why it's open is because right now there is a need for the whole film production pipeline to be rewritten, the rules. And also there's going to be new technological tools made in order to shorten the delivery schedules for the films as well. And no wonder when a company like Netflix ends up buying a company, the visual effects company Scanline from Germany, because Scanline is very famous for doing explosions, water. It's very famous for being the best company to do digital water, right? But there's something beyond that because Scanline is pretty much a digital company that can pretty much understand how a digital pipeline for delivery can make things in a more streamlined fashion so that people can work in a more optimized way without killing themselves like overnight, right? So over the next 5-6 years, there's going to be a huge period of transformation where you're going to see the people from the visual effects, the people from the game industry, it's because a lot of tools are not coming from the visual effects, actually are coming from the gaming part because the gaming people have the know-how and the understanding how to convert these gaming technologies to be used by the film people in order to make things more interesting, right? Like if you see a lot of stuff that you see in the Mandalorian from Star Wars is coming from the gaming technology.
Mm.
So
Wow.
part of that incentive is because a big part of that is that Asia is the largest amount of gaming users around the globe.
Right.
If you add it with China. And because of this amount of capital coming from the gaming companies, they are going to be the main drivers of providing content for the future.
Okay. Well, that's a good tip. That's a good tip for writers, especially, to put these special effects in your scripts, or if you're looking for the next big thing, it will probably be something with the special effects or
no need for visual effects, but it's more about the pipeline, about how to deliver the film, because including the legislature, a lot of people are doing the reverse, and they're getting the movie versions of famous games, like if you see Uncharted with Tom Holland.
Right, exactly.
It came from. So a lot of people are no longer trying to beat the bush by creating original content anymore. Everybody is starting to get something from a famous book or a famous game and moving from the famous game or famous book or a famous toy to make into a movie, okay? Because the movie is going to be like a big, long commercial in order to sell more toys, more games, or more theme parks for
Right.
other brands. Okay, so it becomes more like a closed loop for branding somehow.
Exactly. Well, that's a good business model.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Unfortunately, the downside is going to be original content, and that's going to be the hardest thing to come. But right now, there has never been, and this is where not so much Korea, but more Japan. Japan has been key expert because they're the key providers of for games and anime characters like Cowboy Bebop and the Sonic, the Hedgehog, and
right.
So Japan has been sought after because they have the largest amount of IPs they can convert into films. And whether they're going to be done in Japan or elsewhere, that's going to come out to the people who's going to make the next movies in the future.
Okay. Well, here now my next question is a trick question. Mm-hmm. What question did I not ask you that I should have?
I think the next question that was made.
What did I not ask you that I should have?
That's
something about.
That's a very good question. I think I would say, well, the next question is pretty much, I think, what I said, what goes after China? I think that.
Okay, what goes after China? Southeast Asia?
Southeast Asia, yes. It's not even next it's already happening now. And it's happening now because of COVID, because it's impossible. Physically, it's impossible. Even if you try to do anything with China, China is closed because of COVID. Okay, so there's nothing for you to do in China at this moment. People are hung up because people used to have that kind of connection, that because all the studios from Hollywood went into China, they courted a lot of wealthy people. I'm afraid that COVID killed everything. It's pretty much the end of that phase. And now Cold War 2.0 is now, as thanks to the Russians on that. And especially, unfortunately, by the Chinese government siding with Putin in a very bad choice. Sadly speaking, okay.
Right.
I'm not the only one saying that.
Of course.
It's the real truth. They actually said that during the Olympics. Okay, it's not something that can erase that. People. They declared that and they went on television. So it's not something that people can go on jail, because they said themselves they're going to support Putin on that. Okay. So be it. And I think, unfortunately, everybody's taking a side. I'm not saying who's right and who's wrong, because I think you would be foolish to say there's nothing to be chosen on that matter. Okay.
Right.
And I think it's a very straightforward thinking that if you want to work with the right people, I think you know what to do.
Exactly.
It's pretty much like that. So I would say for the people I'd say it's not a message just for the Western people. I'd say for the people around the globe in general, I think the opportunity is pretty much in Southeast Asia, because people are very open-minded and with open hearts to work with people. Actually, it's the last frontier it's pretty much the last portion of an explored market so far, except Africa. But Africa is like 100 years down to the road, right?
Right.
And the Middle East. But for now, I'd say the next step after China, that would be Southeast Asia.
That's good. The next frontier. I like that.
Yeah.
Now, if you could give advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Go to China.
Go to China after all that.
No, I'd say that was 10 years ago, right? If I say now, no.
Oh, I get it. Okay, yes, okay.
No, because I think it was more to say that, am I regretted to go to China? I would say absolutely not. I think a lot of people not only had fun, they enjoyed it, but we learned a lot from them, actually. It was worth it until we could. But times change, times evolve. Will there be eventually an opportunity in China? Yes, but not now. I would say until there is a government change, or we need to wait until somebody. We're talking about something like 20 years until someone is out of the office, kind of thing.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. We won't mention names.
Yeah. We won't say it, but until there's a change of guard, okay?
Right.
And then people realize that for all the moment when the whole world was open and you were isolated, and you think that being isolated was okay, then great for you. But then if you end up realizing that how much you lost by not being integrated to the world, then I think there's always opportunity, because we are always open. Okay, we have to remind, we are open society, open-minded. So we have to keep the mind open for the day when they come back. We also receive them with open arms as well.
Yes. Well said. Well said. Now, in conclusion, would you like to share any social media details or website links so our audience knows how to keep track of your work?
Sure. You can go to my Instagram, Christopher Chen dash 2099. Okay. That's mine on Instagram. There's also the website from the Monk Studios. I will talk to you afterwards, but then it's themonkstudios.com. And then there's the sister company in Mumbai, founded by John Hughes, which is the founder of Rhythm Hughes. He's our partner and colleague. I think I forgot to tell you, a big part of the people from Monk Studios and Tau Films, they're all originally from Rhythm Hughes, the FX company that won the Oscar for Life of Pi.
Right.
So everybody would say, "Oh, where you guys come from?" Yes, most of the people were originally from Rhythm Hughes, and because after Rhythm Hughes, the whole company collapsed. It's been history for some. Then everybody got reborn as Tau Films and Tau Films for visual effects and Monk Studios for animated films. Okay.
Oh, okay.
So
great.
That's the distinction for that. Okay.
Okay.
So taufilms.com, okay, for visual effects, and themonkstudios.com for animated feature films.
Got it. Okay. Well, Chris, thank you so much for sharing your knowledge and your expertise. And thank you for coming on the show today.
Oh, pleasure's mine. I hope I didn't talk too much, God.
No, it was very educational. No, I really enjoyed it. So thank you. Thank you.
Yeah, next time if you need some friends, I'm more than happy to recommend you to former colleagues of mine that took the China adventure trip. I think they're doing something else also somewhere else, either in the States or either in Southeast Asia or either in South Korea at this moment. Okay?
Perfect. Well, Chris, thank you again, and we'll see you at the premiere.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye-bye. And now for my key points. Today I have 5. Number 1, is Hollywood out of favor in China? The people who live in first-tier cities, for example, Shanghai, Beijing, etc., number about 175 million. This segment of the population is open to Western culture and watching Hollywood movies. However, the majority of Chinese people live in third and fourth-tier cities. This is about 800 million people. According to Christopher, Western culture is still alien to those folks. This makes for an uphill battle for Hollywood to sell content to China. Number 2, should you look for a Chinese producer? Alas, Christopher says this question is about 10 to 12 years too late. It's very difficult now for Westerners to get money out of China. And the Chinese people who do want to do business with foreigners have already gotten their money out of China. As a side note, you can download my ebook, Co-Production Partners, which has a chapter on Chinese companies that have offices in Los Angeles. These companies typically have funds outside of China. Number 3, if not China, what market is growing? The Asia Pacific is where the growth is, especially Southeast Asia. To illustrate, Disney and HBO have moved their headquarters out of Hong Kong to Singapore. Singapore has a strong banking system, and unlike Hong Kong, Singapore doesn't have a national security law. Christopher said that America's presence in the Asia Pacific will only get stronger. Number 4, Thailand, the next frontier. It seems like China is, for now at least, closing its door on the West. The good news is the Asian entertainment market is booming. The streaming market is growing, i.e. Disney Plus, etc. The biggest winners will be Asia Hollywood content. According to Christopher, the biggest opportunities in Southeast Asia are in Thailand, so pack your bags. Number 5, tech's edge over traditional media. Apple and Amazon are giving traditional media companies serious competition. The forecast is that high-tech improvements in content consumption, i.e. faster pipelines, is encouraging. Christopher says content will double or triple over the next several years. He also spoke of big growth in the digital effects and gaming industries. Asia has the most gamers in the world. The downside, though, of movies using games as IP, think the movie Uncharted, which was based on a video game, is that original content will take a hit. As a side note, see my podcast number 34, How to Become a Game Writer, if you want to get into that growing trend. Well, that's the show. Thank you for listening. Producers, talent reps, creative execs, and directors, you can sign up for free membership to the Asia list, Find the next great script or writer before your competition does. Sign up at https://chnlist.com. Writers, sign up for the Asia list. The first 50 writers that sign up can upload their first script for free and no credit card is required. Use this link, https://chnlist.com/first-script-free. Thanks so much for listening, and I'll see you at the premiere. Bye. See you soon.